think we just started, so just leave it here. I'm on. Okay, thanks. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Okay, hi, I'm here. I'm Kenny. I'm glad to be here. I'm delighted to have some folks with questions that I hopefully can answer, and I'll do the best I can. My everybody's favorite dog, Johnny, is sitting right here beside me, and let's take a look and see who's got something to say or ask. And I'm waiting for the first question to come up. The question is, it's from Martin, did you provide guidance at all with A.C. Crispin or any of the other V novel authors, or did they have free rein to write on their own? Was there a V author's cliff notes to help them write realistically about the show? That's from Ilana, and hello, Ilana, my dear. I didn't even know that novels were being done until after they had the first one had already been published. It was a topic of great concern at the time because Warner's sent me a check for some royalty payments. And I said, what is this check for? And they said, oh, that's for the publication of the novelization of the original miniseries. And I said, who published this? And they said, well, we did. And I said, but you didn't have the rights to do that. See, when I created V, because I was the sole writer, I was given what is called separated rights, which means that because I was under contract to Warner Brothers at the time, they owned the television rights to whatever I did with V, but that's all they owned. Rights for publication, rights for toys, rights for anything else had to be negotiated separately, and Warner's never even approached me until the book had been published. So it was a bone of contention for about 3 years. The lawyers went around and around and around, and finally we just let it go and let Warner's have the publication of it. But I still own and control all of the other rights. So it's sort of annoying that it happened that way. I thought that Annie Crispin, rest her soul, sweet lady, we never met personally, but talked a couple of times. I thought she did a fine job in the adaptation. And for the new publication, the hardback that came out about the same time that V, the second generation, was introduced, I wrote a special epilogue to the original piece that Annie had written, so that it would sort of set up where we were going with V, the second generation. There were no Cliff's notes that I know of. I think she just worked from the script and from the visuals that she could see on the screen. It was fascinating to have it happen that way. Okay, still waiting for the other questions to come in here. Yeah, I got it in because of that publication kerfuffle. I got it in my head for a long time that Warner's would have to have their finger in the pie of whatever else I might do with V as the inspiration. So I had just pretty much sort of set it aside until a few years ago when Warner Brothers actually called me. The feature division called me and said they'd like to talk to me about the movie rights, and that's when I realized they didn't own the movie rights. And that's when I realized that I did, and we started looking for funding for, well, immediately I had, as maybe you've heard me say, I had a lot of new best friends right away. And all of the major studios in town wanted to have meetings, and we did, to talk about them buying the rights for me from me so that they could make a movie called V. They said, oh, we'll absolutely let you produce. We might let you write. But for a director, we're thinking maybe, Michael Bay or somebody like that. And I said, no. And when you say no in Hollywood, of course, they say, okay, we understand. How much money do you really want? And I said, no, it's not about that. It's about protecting the property. And so I turned down offers from studios all over town because I was fearful that I would get edged out of the director's chair, edged out of creative control of the project, and have it end up with the lower quality that some of the later versions of V had. And so we've been trying to set it up since then as an independent picture. It's hard to make an independent picture when it costs $60 million, but we have been unrelenting, and we had a very interesting meeting just this last week that I am not at liberty to talk about in detail yet, but it shows perhaps the most promise we've had in the last couple of years for actually getting the picture funded and getting the movie up, and me behind the camera. I'm tired of just dreaming about being on the set of V. I would really like to be there, so we're going to work at it. Question came in here from Adina and Charles. Oh, hi, Adina and Charles. How much of the final battle as filmed was from your own script ideas? Well, I supervised the writing of the final battle. It was originally called V: The Conclusion, and I brought in three very talented writers to work with me. Some of this you may know: Craig Buck, Diane Froloff, and Peggy Goldman, and my daughter Julie also contributed as well. And also Harry and Renee Longstreet, other friends that I had been involved with. And we wrote a story that did the whole big story. The four of us, Peggy, Craig, and Diane, and I, and Julie, created the story. And then each of the three writers took 2 hours of the piece to turn into a screenplay. And so during the story set, the summer of 1983, we spent doing that, and fabricating the story. And then just as it was about to go into production, I left, as and you know some of that story, but not the whole thing. And Warner's handed it off to another group of people who proceeded to sort of dismantle what we did and rewrite it. How is the final battle different from ours? I only am aware of a couple of specific things because I've never read their version, nor have I ever seen the final battle. All of my friends, Mark Singer, Faye Grant, Bobby England, and so many of the people that worked on it, as well as a lot of the crew people, said that I should never read it, I should never see it, because it was not anywhere near what we had set out to do to begin with, and I was going to be very upset if I saw what had happened to it. I did hear about some of the things that were happening at the end of it, where Elizabeth, the offspring, became some sort of magical star child, and was saving the day. It was ludicrous and ridiculous. The only piece that I ever did see of it was I was panel surfing one day, and I happened to come across one scene where then I said, "Oh, wait a minute. God, my God, that's from V, but it's from the final battle, I guess." And it was one scene that I remembered vividly when we wrote it, how we had written it, and what we were planning to do. And it was so different. I watched them in 30 seconds make every mistake they could make in 30 seconds, and I realized I could never watch the whole thing. So I've never really seen the whole thing. But overall, it was very frustrating. It's like having a baby and giving it off to foster parents that you don't trust, to do it. But it was frustrating to say the least. The way we developed the characters was to try to envision where it could go beyond where we had already set up, and think about other characters that we wanted to create. One of them was a very tough guy, but who was wheelchair bound, and his whole character really was based around him having been immobilized in this wheelchair. He was the character that was eventually played in the final battle by Michael Ironsides, who said, "I can't play a character called Ironsides if he's in a wheelchair," because there was a show with Ray Manura called Ironsides about a guy in a wheelchair. And the guys that were rewriting said, "Oh, yeah, well, we'll just take you out of the wheelchair." So you see, by doing that, they destroyed the whole essence of the character that we had created. So there was a lot of stuff like that went on. Okay, next question. I really loved The Man of Legends. Thank you. I'm very pleased about that. The book, incidentally, as of today, has passed 69,000 copies sold around the world. And most importantly, which I'm very happy with, and Amazon is thrilled about, but the most rewarding part to me has been that the reader reviews, that you see on Amazon, have been overwhelmingly positive, and now there are over, I think, 2,600 of them that have kept us in the 4.3 out of 5-star range, kept us right there at the top. And it's also in the top 30 books, the top 30 best-selling books of Amazon for the whole year of 2017 so far. So it's very rewarding, and I'm happy about that. Both the book and the audiobook. Oh, you read the audiobook too. Will V get an audiobook kind of the same you did with the Man of Legends? No, I can't imagine that we'd ever do an audiobook of V since you already have the movie. You know, it's there. But for a lot of people who have listened to the audiobook of The Man of Legends have had very kind things to say about it, particularly the performance by Eric Pierpoint as my leading protagonist in the book. If you haven't heard it, he's just stunning. I mean, Eric is the guy who was my lead alien on Alien Nation. Very, very skillful, wonderful actor out of the drama department at Catholic University in Washington, D.C. And he just nailed it. And everybody who has heard it, um, it was really, really cool to hear. I see that I missed a question by Joyce. Okay, now let me see what that is. And if I can find that up here, I don't see it, Martin. So if you can send that one back again, I will try to pick up on that. Okay, thanks. This is from David Pinkerton in Lincoln, Nebraska. Hello, David. Thanks for taking my question, Kenny. My pleasure. Were there ever any instances in regards to your television projects that you had your eye on a certain actor or actress for a part and it wasn't able to come to fruition? Well, there's been a lot of television projects. Forget the actors. There have been a lot of television projects, David, that didn't come to fruition. That's so all of us who are in this business are used to this sort of thing happening, and it's one of the reasons that I have determined to try to write fast, as fast as I could. Please watch.
No, don't read that.
Okay, don't read that. Susie handed me a note and then said, "Don't read that." Okay, so I won't read it. Um, I was saying that there are a number of times you'll have a project that you pitch to a studio or a network and they love it. And the people who are there buy it and you start writing it and you're getting ready to move forward with it. Sometimes you even get to the point where you are casting and you are building sets. And then the management of the studio changes. And all the guys who said yes and were behind your project are suddenly no longer there, and no longer, and the studio wants to push everything that the old guy had off onto the floor. Uh, Read it, but I did read it, but not out loud. Thank you. Okay, good. Um, they're and it's very frustrating, obviously, when that happens. That happened on probably a half a dozen movies that I've done that were sold, and we're moving down the road toward production, and then the management changed at the studio, and then you're screwed, and everybody goes out and starts over again. It happened easily on that many TV projects as well, and there were. I don't think that I've ever been in a situation though where I had an idea on a particular actor or actress and that didn't happen. I was very lucky with The Incredible Hulk because the first actor that I sent the script to, and the only one I ever sent it to, was Bill Bixby to play Dr. David Banner, because I had seen Bill's work in an amazing piece called Steam Bath. If you've never seen it, you can get it on Netflix. It was a TV project where they did a play called Steam Bath about this group of people that found themselves sort of unaccountably in a steam bath, and they couldn't realize how they'd gotten there, and there didn't seem to be any way out. And slowly you begin to realize that the steam bath is purgatory, and that the little Puerto Rican steam bath attendant is a kind of like a little guy like this. He's God, and it's fascinating. And Bix was just brilliant. He made it in 1973, and it stuck in my head so firmly, that performance that he did, that when I came to looking for my Dr. David Banner, Bill was the first one I thought of in 1977. So it was it worked that way. Um, How much inspiration did you get from anything sci-fi before making your sci-fi related projects? Um, it's funny. I read a lot of science fiction when I was a kid, but I read a lot of other stuff too. And I never thought of myself as going to do work in science fiction particularly. I was trained at the Department of Drama at Carnegie Mellon. Now it's Carnegie Mellon, and which is a theater school with no film or TV. Excuse me. And we're trained in the classic theater from the Greeks right all the way up, through to the present. And I always envisioned having kind of an eclectic career, but I really had sort of a classic education, and in terms of classic literature and plays and that sort of thing. And so when it came to science fiction, uh, what I have always been able to do is sort of to take elements of the classics and imbue that into the science fiction work. I mean, if you look at the Incredible Hulk, for example, or even the Man of Legends, my hero in the book here, um, the, the basic story there is a classic Greek tragic story where the protagonist, the hero, brings down some sort of curse or a problem or onto his head, and then has to deal with it and live through it or die because of it. And that's what happens in the Incredible Hulk, where it's he makes the mistake of thinking that he can set himself above the gods. That's what the Greek tragedians thought. If the protagonist tries to set himself above the gods, then the gods don't like that, and they come to get him. And that's what happened in the case of Bix and Dr. Banner. In the case of my protagonist, Will, in Man of Legends, of course, he makes a mistake that you or I could easily have made, which brings down this curse upon him that he can't die. He goes through the pain of death, but has to stay alive, and he can't stay in the same place more than 3 days, and has to, keep moving constantly across the world because he can never go back either. It's an intriguing project. But the idea is I try to always put as much depth and reality into the piece as I possibly can. And V, of course, as most of you probably know, did not have any aliens or spacecraft in it when I originally wrote it. It was a fascist takeover of the United States. And it was only when I was asked to have an outside force that could maybe be the bad guys that we got into it, and I realized that I could use the aliens and the spaceships and tell the story that I wanted to tell, which was about power, but and how people either suck up to it or try to hide from it or fight back against it. And I could tell that and still have all the razzle dazzle of science fiction and spaceships and things like that that would get it out to a broader audience. But there were no particular sci-fi things that I have tried to put into my work or been inspired by specifically, except one maybe. When I did the two-parter episode on the Bionic Woman called Doomsday is Tomorrow, there is a computer in it that is clearly very much a cousin of HAL, the computer in 2001. So it's sometimes you'll reach in to do that. Sadly, Tormod, hello, my friend. Sadly, we don't have Joe Harnell anymore. Are there any other composer that will get the job, or will you use Harnell's work? No, it would be a new composer. I will certainly have the composer, and there are a lot of them out there that I like. Patrick Doyle, who does a lot of Kenneth Branagh's movies, and other people like him, whom I'm very fond of their work. And I will share with them my thinking for why Joe and I fashioned the music for V the way that we did. I don't know if you know, but when the BBC during World War II was going to send a message to the French underground and the Belgium underground during World War II, they would broadcast it on the BBC. They'd play the first four notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Ba, 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 we've all knows those. Ba, 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 ba. Short, 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 long. That's Morse code for the letter V. And I said to Joe, we got to use that. That's cool. Let's use that as one of the elements of the music. And you hear it very clearly throughout V. And also in the fourth movement of the Fifth Symphony, there's the great heroic theme. They bum, bum, bum bum ba bum 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 bum. That's Beethoven. That's pure Beethoven. And I said, Joe, that's one of the great heroic themes of all time. Let's use that. And so we did. I also played some elements from Gustav Holst's The Planets, Mars, the Bringer of War, which has that ba 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 bum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum. It's a weird thing. Instead of being 4/4, it's a 5/4 figure. You know, it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. And I said, Joe, I like that offbeat kind of march thing. And Joe turned it into a 7/4 figure, which is heard throughout the beginning of the. And Joe also brought in some Wagner, the bum 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 bum, which became the sort of heroic theme for Donovan, is from the Ride of the Valkyrie. Bum 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 bum. We just took the first part. Bum 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 bum. You know, so. And I will certainly share all of that with whoever comes in to do the next music for us. Let me take a look at the next one from Elias. Hi, Kenny. Thanks for taking my question. My pleasure, Elias. Before I even knew I was going to grow up to be a professional musician, oh, here I have been rambling on, and you are one. Joe Harnell's work on V was what first got me interested in the workings of an orchestra and studying how to arrange orchestral music. Joe's talent was second to none, and he is very much missed. I certainly agree with that. Out of all the composers out there, who would you most love to collaborate with on future projects? Well, as I said, Elias, Patrick Doyle is certainly one of them. There are a number that I am particularly fond of. Some of the Newman's work is really great. And I have a list of, and my daughter Katie's going to be very upset because she's a real aficionado of some of the specific ones. The fellow, his name is escaping me at this moment, who did the Batman movies is extraordinarily good for that kind of thing. Because I really want a big, full, 90, 100 piece orchestra score, not some sort of synthetic, nonsense. Partly because I like to keep my musician friends working. But I will tell you, there is nothing like the rush. I still remember sitting on the soundstage at the recording stage at Warner Brothers when we first heard the orchestra play the music that Joe had fashioned. And we worked very closely on fashioning it. Joe always said that I knew just enough about music to be dangerous. That's how he put it. I took piano for about 7 or 8 years when I was a kid. Discovered after about 7 or 8 years as a pianist that I was a really good drummer, and became a percussionist after that. And so I can read music, and and I have some sense of how chord structure works and that sort of thing. And I love sometimes to listen to a piece that on the scoring stage and say, God, that's really great, but maybe instead of the trombones, could we use some bongos there? Now that's a bad example, but you see what I mean. Or that's really good, but could we take that, make it play it 8 VA higher, which means up 1 octave higher. It's good. It's a good sound, but how would it sound if everybody just went up went up to a full octave? So I get in and I mess around. When we were doing Alien Nation, it was particularly fun because I wanted to use a lot of percussion and Afro-Cuban influences in that music. And there's a percussionist here in LA who has a whole warehouse full of macabre percussion instruments that he's collected from all over the world. And they took me in there, and I was like a kid in a candy store. It was great because I was messing around and playing and saying, "Oh, what does this sound like? What does that sound like?" And one of the instruments actually looked so cool and alien. I even used the instrument when we made the movie, the original pilot movie of Alien Nation. And Sean, the boy, is sort of playing it in his room, and it's a sort of a water phone kind of thing. It was bizarre, and it had a creepy sort of screechy kind of sound. And it was fun. This is from Emma. I have a granddaughter named Emma. I was just with her this morning. Little anecdote. I saw V before Star Wars, and the show marked me. Now, when I hear the Star Wars theme, I think about V, the arrival scene of the visitors when the fanfare plays this theme. Well, Star Wars is brilliant, of course. And when did it come out? 70, 77, 78, I guess. right in that area, and certainly what George created, and John Williams. Well, John Williams is no slouch. My favorite John Williams piece, though, I think, is the Superman theme. And you may not know this. This is interesting, but John Williams often uses words to cue him into how to write the piece. So if you listen to the Superman theme, it starts with bum ba bum bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum. You know what that is? Bum ba bum bum ba bum ba bum is Superman. Bum ba bum Superman. Get it? Okay. And when the old Superman television show was on years ago in the 50s, they always said, "Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman." Well, listen to John's score. Bum, 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 bum. You know what that is? Look up in the sky. It's a bird. Look up in the sky. Superman. Yeah. And the other one that is also fun is remember the name of the lead character in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Of course you do. Indiana. Bum, 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 bum. Indiana. Bum, 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 bum. Indiana. That's where it's from. It's intriguing. Okay, let's see here. Have there been any developments bringing Man of Legends to the small or big screen? No developments yet, but we are certainly working on it. The Man of Legends started out to be a screenplay, but because the character was so rich and covered such a huge span of time, I realized that it would be a waste to try to cram it into 2 hours or 2.5 hours even for a movie. And the deeper I got into it, the more I realized I really needed to turn it into a book so that I could really dig it in as deep as I possibly could and go as big as I possibly could with it, and then later on decide, how to turn it into a film. In my estimation, I would really prefer to do the Man of Legends as a limited series, 4 to 6 hours, so that I can really get into all of the different great aspects and possibilities that we have within the story. And we're working on trying to get that set up now. We have a meeting coming up with Netflix and a couple of other places, and Amazon Studios. What a concept! You could do it in the same house. So we are working on that. Stephen asks, what are your top 5 movies? Well, interesting. I have a list of films that I hand out to my film students when I'm doing my seminar of movies that I particularly like. Some Like It Hot is one of my very favorite movies by Billy Wilder. It is just one of the great. It is probably the greatest comedy ever made. Annie Hall also is right up there near the top. There are others. I'm very fond of The Shawshank Redemption in terms of more recent movies. I'm very fond of Buster Keaton, most all of his work, particularly The General and Sherlock Jr. If you've not seen any of the silent comedians like Buster Keaton, oh my God, dig into their work. It's brilliant, as well as Harold Lloyd's work. Some of that stuff is just priceless, and it's timeless. It's like Shakespearean. It works as well now as it did when they first made it. And my favorite movie about movies is Francois Truffaut's film Day for Night. Day for Night. It's about a director making a movie and everything that can go wrong as it does. And Francois Truffaut not only directs the movie that you're watching, but he's on the screen as the director that's trying to make the movie that is in the movie. So Day for Night is great. My favorite movie, hands down, is The Seven Samurai. This is a Japanese film that was made in the 1950s by the great Akira Kurosawa. Uh, this is, you have to see it. It is 3.5 hours long. You feel like you've been watching for maybe an hour and a half because it is so good and so well crafted and so brilliantly shot and acted. And also, there's everything in it. There's scope, there's history, there's incredible action, there's love story, there's pathos, there's humor, there's brilliant cinematography and camera work. And it's one of those movies that will change your life as it has changed so many lives of so many filmmakers. George Lucas and Spielberg and many, many others, Ronnie Howard and others, always talk about Seven Samurai as having provided so much inspiration to them, and as it certainly has to me over the years. And it's in Japanese with subtitles, but please see it. It'll change your life. It's one of the great movies, of all time, really. Um, what inspired you to write The Man of Legends? Well, let's not try to do spoilers here, okay? The principal character is a legendary character that most people have heard about, but they have heard his name or what he is called at any rate, but they don't know his full story. And as I began to research it, and people, it's interesting because he's been written about for centuries, this legendary character. Mark Twain wrote about him in his book Innocents Abroad. Percy Shelley wrote poems about him, supposedly having met him. And there are reports and documentation about this man that go back into the 1600s, the 1500s, the 1400s, the 1200s. And the more I got into it, I thought, wait, who is this guy, and how did this happen? And the more research I did, the more I got intrigued by how a man who has lived for 2,000 years and wasn't a vampire, which we've seen so many times, but was an ordinary guy who made a mistake that put him into a terrible, terrible circumstance. And has been trying to sort of find redemption ever since then. And I realized, wow, this is a great classically based kind of epic story that could combine romance and adventure and action and thoughtfulness. And more importantly, because he was living for 2,000 years, he could have impacted on our entire history for the last 2,000 years. And had contacts and provided inspiration to a great number of real historical people. I mean, in the book, he has conversations and involvement with Percy Shelley and Mary, his wife, whom he helps to solve a problem for the novel that she's writing called Frankenstein. And he inspires Albert Einstein. He inspires Gandhi. And he inspires our Giotto, who creates Renaissance art. He helps talks to a metalsmith named Gutenberg about how he could take a printing press and use movable type. You begin to get the idea, the impact he could have. He helps Levi Strauss, as you'll see, create blue jeans. So it was just a wonderful, rich character, and that I got very excited about, and I'm hoping we can bring it to the screen, eventually. Um, let's see what's coming up next. Oh yes, I hear that Stephen Russell is watching, and I'm happy to hear that. He's a good friend. That's okay, Susie. Why? It's nice. Susie just gave me a note.
With a shh.
With a shush. Yes, yes, yes. But she's good at doing shushing from off camera.
Why do you read everything I give you?
Because I don't want to keep the people saying, "What is he doing?" Well, I don't understand what we're talking about, sweetheart. Okay, thank you, sweetie. We want to talk about inspiration. She has had so much impact on my life and on my writing and on my work, in every aspect of it, all the way along since we first got together 42, 40, almost 43 years ago now. And whenever I say that, she goes, "Oh, well, she's full of shit." You know what I'm saying? She has her value system, her moral compass has always had such an enormous impact on my writing and my thinking that so much of what you're talking about now and so much of what I have done that you like has come from her, my girl, my Susie. As at the end of the Man of Legends, you'll see in the acknowledgments, what I had to say about her, and it's true. She's helping me with a new book too, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's coming out next year for Amazon. That's what happens when you have one successful book, then suddenly they want you to do another one. And fortunately, I had something that I'd been looking to do for a while. Adina and Charles, do you have any plans for furthering story of alienation? I went back to Fox a half a dozen times over the last 15 years, trying to get them to let me resurrect Alien Nation because it was about the kind of stuff and the conflicts that we're going through and the divisiveness that we're going through in America right now, and not just in America. And I could never get them to open the door. They kept saying, "No, well, we don't think so." And then eventually, Gail Ann Hurd, who produced the original motion picture version of Alien Nation, which I then turned into the TV series, she finally decided that she wanted to go back and do a motion picture remake of her original Alien Nation movie. But interestingly, this time she wanted to make it more about the personal lives and the day-to-day living of the people that we were involved with. Oh, one sort of wanted to say, "Gee, Gaylan, didn't you ever take a look at what we did on the series or the 5 movies after it?" Or maybe she did, and that's why she's inspired. And that sort of got fired up a couple of years ago, and I haven't ever heard what happened to it. Things like that come and go, all the time. The $6 Million Man they have been trying to remake for quite a while as a feature. The first adaptation was for Jim Carrey. It was going to be a comedy because he had just done that movie, Bruce Almighty, and so you can imagine some studio executive was saying, "Wow, with this movie made so much money when we gave him powers. How else can we give him powers but not be God?" And they thought, "Oh, we own this thing called the $6 Million Man," and they wrote a script, and apparently, well, didn't get made. And then I heard a couple of years ago that Marty, wait a minute, it's going to come to me. There's another actor, went right out of my head. Mark Wahlberg. Thank you. I knew it was a Mark in there. Mark Wahlberg has been toying with the idea of doing the $6 Million Man as a serious thing. They were calling it the $6 Billion Man, which I think is a little overkill. Maybe the $60 Million Man would make more sense, but 6 billion, even for a bionic guy. But that's been in the works in development for a couple of years now, and I have no idea whether it's ever going to make it into life. Martin is asking about a lot of props and costumes from V have appeared in other shows. Really? I didn't know that. Well, it doesn't surprise me because we rented a lot of props and things like that. Not costumes, but when you're doing a show like that, there are prop houses that specialize in sort of sci-fi, kind of props, which we used in the scenes aboard the mothership. And they're sort of fancy, and they have, they get neon stuff and they, shiny objects, that sort of thing, right? And rather than pay the money to build those things from scratch, it was cheaper just to go out and rent them. The guns and the rifles were all designed by Chuck Davis specifically for the show, specifically modeled after the German Luger, obviously, as you can see, and those are still around. I had a rifle stolen from my office about 10 years ago too. I'm still trying to figure out who boosted that, but I do still have the pistol. So yes, things get used over and over again. I mean, the ruby slippers don't get, but I believe most of a lot of the costumes from V are still stored at Warner Brothers somewhere. They keep a lot of stuff, and when they can go back and use them, they try to do so. I'm trying to see if I don't have it here. The pictures at the office of where they had the spacecraft stored on the back lot of Universal while I was dubbing the soundtrack for Short Circuit 2. I took a walk on the back lot one day and discovered the used spacecraft lot on the back lot at Warner Brothers, and they eventually went away. Let's see what's next here. The 2000 V convention was fantastic, was it? Has anyone asked you to be involved in anything like that since? No, I was invited to the first Bionic Con in 2006. This was the first time Lindsay Wagner was actually going to do a con, and they asked if I would come along and be there too, and I said sure, I'd be delighted. And then when I got there, I discovered that they had surprised me by also bringing in Lou Ferrigno and Mark Singer, and I've got this wonderful photo of the four of us. It's on my website; you can see it there. with my 4 stars. It was great. I languished that Bill Bixby wasn't there, but it was a lot of fun. And I did a couple of those and a couple of other local things. We did a con for Alien Nation. It was a little bit like Galaxy Quest in some respects. I mean, for the most part, the people that were there at the Alien Nation one were from the planet Earth, and pretty bright, literate people from all walks of life. But at one point, this one guy, sort of a scruffy, like maybe off the street kind of guy, came up to me, and I honestly was just like this. He said, "I am from the planet Mongo, and I want you to know that we approve of what you are doing." And I went, "Okay, security." It was a little too Galaxy Questy, but basically, I love being able to talk directly to the fans. When the Incredible Hulk DVDs were being released as a set, Universal asked me if I would go down to the con and to this Comic Con in San Diego and do a Q&A. And I thought, sure, I figured it would be me and maybe, 150, 200 people. And then they took me into this airplane hangar where there were like 4,000 people standing on chairs and raving. There's nothing quite as ego boosting as walking into a room full of 4,000 people that like you and that like your stuff, and are always interested in that. It's great. Um, Tormod is asking, do I like real sets or CGI? Which do you prefer? Well, I sort of fall into the camp of whatever works best. Generally, and you'll hear Peter Jackson say this as well as a lot of other big directors, that if we can get it done in the camera, we much prefer to do that as opposed to having to fake it and cheat it. But a lot of times there's just no alternative. If you look at get the Lord of the Rings and look at some of the special features, because Peter really lets you behind the curtain and to see all the stuff that went on, and reveals how some of the things that look like they might have been visual effects are not really. One of the scenes, for example, in the first Lord of the Rings movies, is where Ian McKellen is being served, giant Gandalf, right, is being served a cup of tea by Ian Holm, the little hobbit, and Ian McKellen is 7 feet tall, and the hobbit is like 4 feet tall, and yet they're right there. He's serving him the tea. Well, is that a visual effect, a split screen or something? No. You know what they did? They put Ian McKellen up here close. Where is it? Right in front of the camera, and Ian Holm way back here in the back, and they just pretended that they were opposite each other. But because Ian Holm was closer to the camera, and Ian Holm was way back here, and McKellen was close, he looks giant. When Frodo is riding in the wagon with Gandalf at the beginning of the movie, and Gandalf is sitting here, and Frodo is right beside him, about this big, Elijah is not really sitting here. He's sitting way further back, but it's forced perspective, and it looks like, and it happened in the camera. It was not CGI or anything like that. More and more CGI is being used to help you extend sets. If you don't have the time and the money to build the whole set that you need, then you'll use that as you'll create set extensions with CGI. And when it's done well, the audience shouldn't be aware of it. To me, the most important thing is that if someone is looking at a movie that I've made and they say, "Wow, what a great shot that is," or "Wow, listen to that music cue," I haven't done my job. I don't want them to be thinking about that it's a great shot or listen to that music. I want them to be immersed in the picture. So the ideal way for visual effects to be used is to have it essentially not be noticed, and that to me is the best kind of work that there is to do, and the most difficult too. Doing special effects is very, very psychologically tricky because Susie will sit in a movie sometimes with me and say, "That doesn't look real," and she's right, but she couldn't tell you why it doesn't look real. It just, she feels it, and sometimes it's as simple as the fact that there's the light source, if the sun is supposed to be up here somewhere, and the shadows are on the other side, that things are mixed up and confused, and sometimes it's because the people who are making one of the elements in CGI put their sun in the west, and the people who are making the background put their sun in the east, so the shadows are in the wrong places. Little subtle psychological things like that that people don't even notice, and that that get tricky. Joyce asks, how did he being me, go about planning the filming of V? Oh my. As a director, how involved were you with location? Also, how much backstories do you give to the actors? Do you know how Kathleen and Robert Maxwell felt? Yeah, of course. The As a writer, you really have to put yourself in each one of the characters to make sure that you've got their backstory. I was trained at Carnegie in the theater, as I said, so we were drilled about the Stanislavski approach to building a character, to creating the full life of a character, so that you know that your character has a life when he's on screen right here now, but he also has a life when he's off screen, both before and after when he's on screen. So you really have to know everything you possibly can about all of the characters, and then find ways to let that become illustrated when you're doing the script and making it go forward. I always try to read each script from the standpoint of each character one at a time, so that because I know that the actor is going to do that. The famous thing in Hollywood is that the way the actor thinks is he's got the script in front of him and he's reading and he's going, oh, let's see, bullshit, 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 my line, bullshit, 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 my line. And so you want to make sure that you have serviced that actor's character as fully as possible, and that when that actor has questions about why would my character do this or how did I get here, the director knows the answer. you know. And if you don't know the answer as a director, and I always tell my film students this, don't bullshit the actor because they can smell that a mile away. I tell them, if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know. Let's figure that out together. I never thought of that. And then you've engaged the actor and you're working together. Um, the filming of V was catastrophic. Normally for a 4-hour miniseries, which was at the time the highest, most expensive hour per hour miniseries that had yet been made for television, uh, for a project like that, you'd have 4 or 5 months of preparation time to set your locations and decide how you wanted to build the sets, to do the storyboarding that you needed to do, to begin to work out the visual effects, to do the casting of the 60 roles. 4 or 5 months would be normal for prep for a project like V. From the day that Brandon Tartikoff, the president of NBC, read my 230-page script and said, go, until the day I said action was 2.5 weeks. That's all the prep time we had to cast it and cast 60 roles and do all of the prep and everything that we had to do. And people in the industry fall out of their chairs when I tell them that. They say, you can't do that. That's impossible. Well, we did it because we had no choice. Brandon needed to get something big and flashy on the air right away because NBC was in the toilet with the ratings, and they were desperate for it. Warner's hadn't sold anything all year, and so we were scrambling. And what we did was we prepped, and I had my whole crew from The Incredible Hulk with me, so we all talked the same shorthand, which made it a little easier. And what we did was we did all the prep we possibly could and all the casting we possibly could in the first 2.5 weeks, and then we started shooting. And then every weekend, we would spend the whole weekend, wall to wall, prepping for the next 5 days of filming. And then the next weekend, we'd do it again. And, when you're making films, there's what is called straight time, which is the amount of time that you've been allotted to do a particular day's worth of film, okay, or a week's worth. And then there's overtime, which is when you go over those allotted hours. And then there's golden time, where suddenly whoever is working is getting paid double their normal rate. Well, there were some people on the project of V who were working in what became known as Diamond Jubilee time because they were working 7 days straight with no break, with long hours. And there are still guys and girls that worked on V with me that come up to me and say, hey, I really want to thank you for my house, my boat, my car, my plane, because we really helped make a lot of people rich, a lot of crew people that really deserved it. And I was involved in picking all the characters, all the locations, all of the actors, And that's how it happened. And as soon as somebody came into my office that I thought was right, we said, okay, you're the one I want. Don't bring anybody else in. But we started shooting before I had finished casting. Mark Singer wasn't cast until Friday before we started filming Monday. Jane Badler wasn't cast until we'd already been filming for a week or so. I had not yet found my Diana. And we didn't even have a budget for the whole project until we were 2 weeks into already filming it. And it was crazy. And then 4 weeks into principal photography, one of my leading ladies was murdered. That would be Dominique Dunn, who played the teenage girl in Poltergeist, and she was my teenager she played the role of Robin in V. And she was killed in her front yard, strangled by her boyfriend, and went into a coma. And a week later, I was with her family when they took her off life support. And it was a devastating blow, emotionally more than anything for all of us who were working on the project. But also it meant that I had to go back and reshoot everything that she had been involved in. It was really tough. But yes, the director is there full time, all the time, Joyce, trying to make it work. Elias, are there any current actors whose work has impressed you enough to want to cast them in a future project? Oh, yes, rafts of them. Are you kidding? Every time I go out, I'm looking at something. Oh, he'd be a really interesting guy for Donovan. Oh, that's maybe Carey Mulligan for Julie. That would be pretty cool. So yes, we have a list, and we're working on that. And ideally, we can put together a really strong ensemble cast so that we can really take the whole casting thing up a level. I love the performances that I got out of all the great actors that I worked with on the original V, and I'm still really, really proud of that. But new actors, whether they're stars or not, will bring new juice to it, and I'm constantly looking and keeping my eyes open for who will be the best. And we are, incidentally, I know, is he ever going to get the money for V? Well, we're working pretty hard at it, and hopefully something there will happen. If you're writing for a television series, do you have to create the entire season in your mind before you start, or do you only write a few episodes at a time and let it unfold as you go along? The answer is yes, yes. um, when we did, when Alien, I was asked to take a look at the Alien Nation movie feature. To me, and some people have heard me say this, it was like Miami Vice with Coneheads. Uh, and um, and I didn't really appeal to me, and I wasn't really that interested in doing it. And I was sitting alone in this screening room at Fox and looking at it. I was just about to not even watch the whole movie when there was one scene where Alien Mandy Patinkin, who was playing the alien cop George, waved goodbye to his family, and there was one shot of his wife and two little kids standing on the front porch of their sort of ramshackle house. And when I saw that, the bell went off, and I said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! Wait a minute. Who are they? What's it like to be them? What's it like to be the world's newest minority?" And I went up to Fox executives who were waiting anxiously for me to say something that they wanted to hear. And I said, "Okay, you think you've got Lethal Weapon with aliens, right?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "No. What we've got here is a chance to redo In the Heat of the Night, which was a movie about racial prejudice with Sidney Poitier and Rod Steiger." Um, I said, "This is about culture clash. This is about discrimination. This is about intolerance. This is about not liking Muslims to come into your country, and that's part of the reason I was eager to try to upgrade it and do it again now. And so that gave me a premise that I knew would be able to go on and way beyond just a 2 hour movie or a few episodes. Because that sort of conflict is ongoing, Joyce, and it's all the time stuff that you can keep. Sorry, Liz. That's the kind of stuff that you can get back into. You can immediately see how it can go on. It has, as they say in the business, it has legs. You can see that it can keep walking for a long time. And once I had set up those character conflicts and the basic thematic premise of the piece, and then I could bring in other actors and other writers, like my friends Diane Froloff, who had written V with me, Andy Schneider, who was Diane's husband, who was a producer who started with me as a story editor on A Bionic Woman and Hulk, and then went on to produce a lot of big shows, including The Fall Guy, and right now he and Diane are doing Chicago Med. and I brought them in, as well as Harry and Renee Longstreet and other great writer friends, and they got into what the premise was about, and then you begin to see where you can go with it. And it's great fun when you have a project like Alien Nation, where you're also creating a whole species as you go along. And that's when I came up with the idea that, okay, if two of them, male and a female, want to have sex for to enjoy themselves, fine. But if they want to procreate, it takes three of them, you know. And wait a minute, how does that work? And that gave us a way to go. And then I thought of, okay, well, in seahorses, the male gives birth, right? I said, suppose in the alien species, it's the male that gives birth. You know, the female passes off the egg and the male gives birth. So that allowed us to do Pregnant George. And so some of it comes up while you're on the fly, but it's based on an overall overarching concept and feeling that you have to have, you know, when you're going into it to begin with. Um, do I have a dream cast in mind for Man of Legends as a limited series? Well, one of the great things about, and this is Adina and Charles asking, there's a number of actors that would be really, really fine to play my leading guy, 33-year-old guy. As I was writing the novel, there is a character who is described only as the sleek young man, who is clearly also an immortal of some sort, a darker character who seems to be an emissary of darker forces. And as I was writing him, I was thinking, oh, this is Jude Law. Or in a perfect world, this is Leonardo DiCaprio. Could I get him for that? Well, maybe because I only need him for a certain amount of filming, and I don't need him for the whole movie. So sometimes you can work out deals like that. But also, in addition to that, my character, encounters a lot of real historical people who are only seen in shorter sequences, vignette kind of things, which gives me a great opportunity to do a lot of cameo casting, you know. And those are great to do because then you can, in your trailer, you can put the shot that says Academy Award nominee, Academy Award winner, so and so, and you see all these people, and you go, my God, they're all in this movie. Yes, they are, and they're in it, but they're maybe only in it for one small piece, but nonetheless, they're in it. We hope to do the same kind of thing with the casting of V when we get to that. Stephen Russell, there you are. Is there a movie genre that you have always wanted to make but never had the opportunity to do so? Oh, there's so many of them. So many of them, Stephen. I originally, and I know many of you may know this story, the only reason I took on The Incredible Hulk was it was a trade-off. I said to the head of Universal Television at the time, okay, I will create this thing called The Incredible Hulk as a television series for you, but I want something in return. I want something that is classy, that is classic, that is a great period piece, and I don't think that Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe has ever been done well. And Frank Price, who was then head of Universal, said, okay, Ken, sounds good. You'll do The Incredible Hulk pilot, and we'll do a 4-hour miniseries of Ivanhoe. Great. And I wrote the pilot for Incredible Hulk in 7 days, top to bottom. 7 days, that original script, right? And it went on, became a big hit, was on for 5 years. Asked me if Ivanhoe ever got made. No. Why not? Because the management changed. Frank left Universal, and the people that came in would not honor his deal. Go ahead and sue us if you want to. We're just not going to do it. Happens over and over again. So that's one that's still out there that I want to do. I have a great comedy it was originally titled The Mad Woman of New York. And it was essentially Don Quixote done as a contemporary piece with a female lead. We were going to do it. I sent the script to a guy at MGM on a Monday. He called me on Wednesday and said, we want to make this movie. I said, you mean we want to develop the script? And he said, no, we want to make this movie. How much is it going to cost? I said, I don't know. Yeah, $15, $20 million. He said, well, we want to send you on a location scout and get all the, because it was going to shoot in New York and the Amazon. And I said, okay, and we were steaming along, and I was reading at the time all of the lead actresses in Hollywood at the moment. A young actress named Demi Moore, who was just breaking out. An actress named Kate Capshaw, who had just done the second Indiana Jones picture, who was really, really good. Kelly McGillis, who had just done Witness. Every woman in Hollywood actually read the script, wanted to do it, because she's really a wonderful sort of Errol Flynn kind of female who's nuts but brilliant. And we're moving along, and then the management changed at MGM, and the new guys that came in pushed everything off the old guy's desk, and there it goes. So I'm hoping to do that someday. It's a wonderful sort of romantic comedy that's great. Okay, we're getting near the end here, but Emma asks, with friends, we talked about the representation of female leaders in movies or series, and too many characters behave like men. The script does not seem to have been written for a woman. In this, I find the writing of the character Juliet Parrish very interesting. The character is really feminine and strong at the same time, a very good representation. This type of writing is always rare now. Do you have think about the representation of female leader when you wrote this character? Well, Julie's, first of all, I was raised by a very strong woman. I had a strong father, but he lived in Arkansas, and I lived with my mother in Washington, D.C., Maryland, outside of Washington. And she was married to a guy who was a nice guy, my stepfather, but my mother was really the dominant force in the family. And she was a career woman and a businesswoman. And and from my perspective, even as a young kid, as a teenager in the 50s, uh, that was the way women should be. I mean, or that's the way women were. My mother was representative to me of somebody who could hold her own in any company, whether they were male or female. And so I always sort of had strong women, in my head. And I also felt, as you do, that very often uh, that's been given short shrift in Hollywood writing, particularly. And so what I've always tried to do is make the characters as real, believable, and also who they should be. It's sort of hard to put it into words. Julie, the character of Julie, was, as you may know, based on a real woman. You can look her up on Google. Andrea DeJong, Dejong, I think, I don't know. Or I think there's maybe even references to her in on the commentary I did on V. But she was a Belgique woman who was a nurse during World War II, and she was only 22 or so at the time. And she walked into Bilbao, Spain, one day with a half a dozen British flyers whom she had rescued in France, walked them across the Pyrenees to Spain, where they could get out and get back to their home and back into the fight. And they asked her if she could bring more people, and she said yes. And she developed what was called the Comet Line of the underground in World War II. And so she was a young woman who was doing this job that the Nazis arrested her a couple of times and let her go because they said, well, she's just a girl. She can't be the one that's behind this. Girls don't do things like that. Wrong. You know, and so that to me became the prototype for Julie, and I love the fact that she does not seek the leadership, but that I had her be the natural. She's the natural leader, and that's the great scene that she has with Ruby, where she says, "I don't feel that," and Ruby says, "Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you don't feel it. We do. We know you're the natural, so just do it." Um, okay, I just want to ask one last question, and then we'll won't take any more questions at this point. Are there any current shows on television, Netflix, Amazon that you find particularly inspiring or just plain enjoy? As many of you know, I don't watch a lot of television. I never have. I've always been more interested in movies and theater and reading than watching TV. But there are a couple of things that popped up. Stranger Things. I've seen a couple. I saw a couple of the original episodes. I thought it was really intriguing and how it was put together. I wasn't quite sure they had the rules tightly done enough because when you're doing something that's beyond the edge of reality, you got to have really tight rules and then stick with them. That's important. But I did enjoy it. I also like Mozart in the Jungle quite a bit. If you haven't seen that, which was enjoyable. And when I saw The Wire, which I didn't even become aware of until its last season, at which point we got the from the beginning and started looking at them, and it was tough and hard and dark and grim in many places, but it was so brilliantly done, and the writing was so good, and the characters were so solid, and the performances were fabulous that you just couldn't look away. And I was very impressed by that. But beyond that, what I try to do is keep looking for what's the next thing that I want to do. and hopefully it will be V. I also do have the new book that will be coming out next year. We'll do another session about that. I will tell you that the title of it is The Darwin Variant. The Darwin Variant. And it's about how shards of a rogue comet ended up falling across a portion of western Georgia, and they bring a virus that has a profound effect on humanity in the area, and it's beginning to grow and grow and grow. And it's a very, I think, intriguing book. Amazon is very excited about. But we got more time to talk about that, and we'll do it next time. So anyway, I hope I haven't bored you too much. Thank you for taking the time and for being here with us, and you're welcome for sharing my time with you. It is my pleasure always to talk to the folks like you who care about what I do, and I care so much about you being there to care. Thanks a bunch, and I'll see you again soon, I hope.